Today on the Rise of the Challenge podcast.
I knew that I would figure it out. I think my life has probably been characterized by just kind of doing things and thinking, look, if I get backed against a wall, I'll figure out my way out. I'm not worried about that. And that's what I told my wife when we were getting ready to be married and I didn't have any sort of job figured out. And that's been the story. And that has definitely come back to bite me many times. But I'm still standing, so I think we're okay.
Welcome to the Rise of the Challenge podcast. Joined today, please welcome Steven Borden. How are you doing today, Steven?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to meet you. Good to be here as well.
We're so excited to have you on the show to talk about your rise to the challenge. What we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what you like doing growing up.
Man, born in Atlanta, Georgia, but spent probably most of my life in Southern California. For me, most of my childhood was playing football, American football. And so just, I would say that occupied most all of my time, my thoughts, my goals. I wanted to play in the NFL. So I grew up watching, that we had a VHS. This is going to really date me, but we had like a VHS tape, which at the time DVDs were a thing, but there was an old VHS tape in our house called NFL's Greatest. And so I'd watch clips of Joe Montana and Brady and, all the greats, and I wanted to play football. So kind of dove deep into that sport for most of my life, played through college and brief stint bouncing in and out of NFL tryouts, and formally finished my football career in the beginning of 2018, end of 2017.
With going from Georgia to California, a lot of big California, Georgia football teams. Was there one that you specifically liked watching or kind of were, oh, if I could reach that at an NFL level, I would want to go for that team?
Not really. I mean, we left Georgia when I was 5, so I wasn't really old enough to understand much yet. I think growing up watching that film I mentioned, watching Joe Montana, I always thought the 49ers would have been kind of cool. But I think because we moved around a bit, I never really had a team that was my team. And still to this day, I kind of end up just supporting individual athletes more so than players or than teams. Other than obviously the college I played at, I'll still support those guys. But
what was the position that you enjoyed playing for football?
That's a tough one. I played all over the place. And part of that is due to the fact that I played 8-man football in high school for most of high school. So that kind of changes the dynamic of the sport a little bit. So I played quarterback, but it's really like a running back in that case. But I would say I landed on tight end in college, and that's a position that I really enjoyed. There were certain aspects of it that I really, really enjoyed.
For someone that's listening that maybe doesn't know what 8-man football is, what is the biggest difference between that and then the normal game that people maybe are used to?
Yeah, I think functionally there's less linemen down. That's the main thing. Very weird to be a quarterback because it's hard for a pocket to form. So you have a center, and then you'll have a guard and tackle on one side and a guard on the other side. So it's kind of weird. Everything always ends up, you get the ball as a quarterback and you just start running. There's really no room to sit in the pocket, step up and throw. And so that habit, I actually played quarterback, and that habit kind of followed me on to when I did go play 11-man football in Texas. I moved right before my senior year, started to a big high school in Texas. And I would get the ball and just start running and try to make things happen that way. And my coaches would say, Steven, there's a pocket there for a reason. You can relax. So that's probably the biggest functional difference between the two.
You talked about moving to different locations. How did that play mentally for you with now I have to live a new life in a new area, making new friends, kind of that atmosphere? How did that pertain to you?
I would say the biggest move would be the one right before my senior year started, because it's probably 7 days away from starting my senior year. And I had always wanted to go play big time football. And there was a couple big high schools where I lived in California, but I was stuck at a small school. For a long story short, I was stuck at a small school that I enjoyed, but it wasn't the same. And so I'd always dreamed of going to play and at a bigger school, and then had finally accepted that that's not what's going to happen. I'm going to play 8-man football my senior year. And then a week or so before it starts, hey, you're moving to Texas, and we're moving like tomorrow. And so now I'm in, going from California to Texas, which are two completely different places. And also in two completely different football programs, playing at a big school, public school, Friday Night Lights, the whole deal. I used to, I'd see clips of Friday Night Lights and hear the jokes, and I thought, there's no way football's actually that big. High school football is actually that big in Texas. And I got there and realized it is. Like, people love high school football out there, and it's super cool. So that was a big jump for me, but it was something I enjoyed. I wanted to play big time football, and I met a lot of really good people there. I love Texas. So I think it was all in a good thing.
I love seeing the videos of what the high schools look like and how big their stadiums are in Texas. Just thinking, like, it's just crazy how big it is, and how you see like all the kids starting at a young age and where they get to as they get older. What was the challenging part from a training aspect, especially with high school sports? It puts a lot of pressures on the students to get into that physical condition. How was that for you?
I loved it. I mean, I wanted to play ball. So, I mean, even from the time I was a kid, my parents would joke, we'd have games Saturday mornings when I was 8 or 9 years old, and they would come in the room thinking that they needed to wake me up because it's, 6:30 and we got to go because the game's 2 hours away or whatever else. And I would already have my pants on, my shoulder, but in the early days, I would have my shoulder pads on. I wanted everything to be ready, and so I'd be like in my room with my shoulder pads on, my jersey on, ready to go. I'd be in our backyard running, trying to set up conditioning drills, just whatever I saw. I'd see clips of Jerry Rice conditioning, and I was like, I guess I got to do what Jerry Rice does. So I think the hard training for me was, if anything, probably something that I enjoyed. And not to throwing anybody in particular under the bus, but most programs you go to, you don't have the most sophisticated strength conditioning programs. There are even probably, professional teams that do some funky things in strength conditioning. So, but it's just part of the sport, and I always enjoyed getting bigger, getting stronger, faster, all that kind of stuff.
Was football always the main focus, or did you ever find anything different that kind of you wanted to pursue? As sometimes that dream question, or that question, what is that dream job? For you, it sounds like it really was football. But was there ever a moment that you kind of thought maybe a different direction? Because you never know what can happen in the game of football.
Exactly. And I would say I spent most of my life with the most presumptuous thought, which was, I'm going to go play NFL for 10 years, then I'll retire at 35 and, have a bunch of money in the bank, and I'll go start my own thing. That was just always what I knew I was going to do. And just like you said, for one, that, anything can happen. Injury, something could have happened. I could have been paralyzed or, debilitated somehow. So I would say football at the margins, it was a net positive in my life for the character that it built, the things that I learned, the people that I met, the path that it put me on. It's why am where I am now. I would say where it probably detracted from me was I didn't care about anything else. So in school, I like bare minimum is probably a generous description of what my effort in high school and college. It was just whatever kept me eligible. And I look now, I've probably turned into more of an academic nerd. I love learning. And I think there's probably things I was like, man, I would have paid a little bit more attention in physics in high school and college if it were today. But yeah.
It's probably at the time you're not thinking, oh, this is so interesting to learn about. Where I think a lot of people, when they get out of school, they're like, oh, I enjoy learning about something, because I hated school. I mean, I did
For
fine.
sure.
But nowadays, anytime I got to learn, it's like, okay, cool. Give me a video, give me a book, something that can keep me going to learn even more and more, learning even more concepts. Did you have anyone that was a big motivator for you? Someone that was a huge inspiration growing up?
I mean, I would say I learned a lot, obviously, from my dad, just in observing him as a human and his work ethic. And I think, if I were to go down a list of the things that, the character qualities that I aspire to, and the things that maybe the good parts of me. A lot of them, at least in terms of discipline, integrity, work ethic, standing by your word, never feeling as though you're owed anything or you deserve anything by default. All of those things I am very, very convinced that I got from my dad, both from what he taught me and from what I observed from him. Outside of that, I never really had any, I wasn't really somebody who looked at different celebrities or pro athletes or anything like that. And I don't know. I love and admire a lot of them, but I couldn't think of one that I truly modeled after.
With your dad being such a high profile figure in TV and the industry, did that feel a lot of pressure for you to kind of keep a good mindset and kind of stay straight and not go off the beaten path because his reputation could be on the line because maybe of actions that you might have done?
No, I don't think I've ever thought about that. I think I probably, not felt pressure, but there was probably a concern for just not being an idiot because, my dad, outside of who he is as a personality, he's my dad. And, he cared about me doing the right thing. And so just like any other kid who has kind of a respect for their dad, that probably kept me on the right path more than anything else. Just, he certainly was not a one of those dads that you just walk all over. He had respect in the household. So
When you got to college, did anything change from a football aspect in your training? Did you kind of see a growth in you personally, but not like physically in other areas?
probably, yeah. So when I got to Kentucky, I spent a few years bouncing at different colleges. And it took me a while to actually get a Division I scholarship for several reasons. But when I landed at Kentucky, Kentucky had started to adopt a formal sports science program with athlete tracking technologies. This is something that's completely commonplace now. Every Division I and pro team they'll usually have a couple sports scientists on staff, and they will use some sort of, you've probably seen on ESPN, inside the, Atlanta Falcons training, and you'll see them using different pieces of technology to measure their players doing different things. That was not happening at scale when I started playing at Kentucky. This was 2013, my first year there. And I believe it was us and the Philadelphia Eagles were the only two teams really doing this, at least to that degree. And so we brought in Catapult, which is GPS units, Omega Wave. I won't bore you with all the specific pieces of technology, but I think that drew interest to me. I wanted to know why we were measuring what we were measuring and what insights can we get from this? Is this reliable information? What can I do to potentially swing in the other direction or things like that? So I think that I had always had an interest in human performance and health and nutrition, but when I got to Kentucky and realized, wow, there's actual, I can actually monitor some of this and observe changes, and I can do one thing and, I can see a result come from it. I thought that was pretty cool. So I think I learned a bit there, and that probably spurred a further interest in sports science from me there. And outside of that, I mean, on the maybe psychological level, there's a ton that I learned there, a lot of really good experiences at Kentucky, and a lot of things that I would do different now looking back.
Do you think having that interest helps you to where you are coming from being an athlete, but still being at that physical level with training just at home, having that knowledge and information that maybe someone who has no idea could benefit and learn from?
I think some of the knowledge is good. I've learned more in the last 5 years than I did in the first. I feel like in almost every area of my life, the last 5 years, I've learned more than I did the first 25. But I think what I walked away from there was my threshold is just much, much higher than it would have been if I hadn't gone there, both for what the pressure that can take and the level of training maybe that feels normal to me. So look, I always say this, it sounds, when you talk about, Hell Week was so difficult and all that, I always hear myself, it sounds funny because I picture, people that went through, like actual Navy SEALs or going through buds or stuff. Like I just picture them laughing, like, bro, you went home to your bed. You know what I mean? So let me just
Yeah.
preface by saying, I don't think it was that hard. But when you compare it to just regular life, it was a lot more difficult than just, training, going to 24-hour fitness and training. And so, getting pretty used to waking up in the wee hours of the morning when it's 20 degrees outside and getting up out of your bed and going to train really hard and have coaches scream at you and sprint. And then at the same time, getting prepared to run out on a field when there's 100, 2,000 people at LSU or wherever else we're playing, screaming opposing fans, and dealing with probably that pressure. Those are things that make normal life stuff it just doesn't feel that difficult. And so for me, that's what I'm most grateful for from my experience in football is just, most other things just don't feel that difficult.
Do you have a memorable moment in your college football days? Anything, a specific event, a game, a location that is just something that you'll always remember?
Yeah, it's us. We played South Carolina at home. So we actually, my senior year, we started pretty strong. We were 5-1 at the start of the season, with our only loss being in triple overtime against Florida. And so we had Mark Stoops had just taken over the program. And so we had just a lot of heat. And we played South Carolina at home. It was our first time doing blackout. So all the players were in all black with chrome helmets. And so the whole stadium showed up in black. It was really cool. And we won the game and at the last second. And that was really cool. Fans stormed the field. I could found my friends on the field, and that was a really good memory, for sure.
You mentioned bouncing from different tryouts for the NFL. What was challenging about that, going from different ones and getting close, but maybe not reaching the full potential and getting signed?
I think it's just understanding that there are no guarantees. And so you just have to be willing to kind of do nothing. You have to put the rest of your life on hold for the sport of football with the fact there's no guarantees. And that's just what people go through. And I was at a point in time where I was approaching marriage, and then I was married. And so it's kind of like, in football, you don't make any money unless you're actually on a roster playing. And so I think just that challenge of, you never really know when the right time is to stop. And I think in some ways it's probably easier if you have a debilitating injury, because it's, maybe it's time. But when you have to make that choice yourself, it's a little bit more difficult.
During that time, did you ever think about what is that backup plan, since football was that main priority, that main focus?
No, I didn't. I think I knew that I would figure it out. I think my life has probably been characterized by just kind of doing things and thinking, look, if I get backed against a wall, I'll figure out my way out. I'm not worried about that. And that's what I told my wife when we were getting ready to be married and I didn't have any sort of job figured out. And that's been the story. And that has definitely come back to bite me many times. But I'm still standing. So I think we're okay.
Did she like hearing oh, I'm just going to figure it out with just getting closer to getting married, or after finally getting married? Just her hearing that, did that give her any concerns at all?
She has to be the easiest person to be married to. She has kind of just been along for the ride for our entire time. I've had some ideas. There have been opportunities that have come up. Oh, there's a football league in Japan. Do you want to, there's a potential contract. Do you want to go? I get off the phone. Giselle's, sure. I don't know. It sounds fun. Like, it's just, we've had moments like that. And so she's just been, I think the way she describes it is, before me, she just imagined, look, as long as I can have a bed to sleep in and can maybe travel somewhere that I like to go, I'm pretty happy. If I can go visit Maui once a year, scrounge up a Spirit Airlines ticket or something like that. Like that was her, I'll be totally fine. And then I came in and put all these ideas of NFL money into her head and didn't make the NFL. So that was interesting. But no, she's so easy.
I'm now interested in that Japan opportunity. How did how did that
Yeah.
come about? Because that just seems like something like they must have found you some way to give you a call or have that opportunity to speak to someone.
Yeah, man. The football thing since I finished at Kentucky, it has been the weirdest. There have been a few. So there was uh, I can't remember if this was my wide receiver coach, Donnie Walker. He wasn't the coach at Kentucky, but he coached me just on the side while I was at Kentucky. If it was him that teed me up and said there's these people in Japan, I can't even remember now. This is probably 2017, but I think there was a league at one point in time. And I got put in touch with one of the coaches or one of the managers or something like that. And one of those things that just you have a couple calls back and forth, and for whatever reason, one way or another, it falls through. There was that. There was something called Major League Football. I think it was MLFB. I found out that I got drafted to a team. I keep in mind I had been done playing now. Like I wasn't in football shape at all. I was just doing media. I was doing digital marketing for companies on the side, and I find out via Twitter that I'd been drafted to this team. People were sending me tweets going, "Congrats on getting drafted to whatever team it was." And I'm thinking, this can't be legit. I'm finding out through Twitter. And then I get a call from the coach, "Hey, Steven, we're reporting for camp on July 8th or whatever." And then, of course, through seeing articles, I saw the league was having money problems and was about to
Oh, great.
fold. And coach calls me and tells me, "Hey, no, we're set. Trust me. Don't believe what you read." And then 2 days later or something, the league closed. So I've had a lot of experiences like that where, in the early days, now I would never step away from what I'm doing, the company that I work with, to go do something like that. But back then I was like, slinging digital marketing services on the side. And, so for me to go, make a little bit of money actually playing football again and move overseas with my wife sounded fun. Not so much anymore.
If you were able to get back into football at this time with how the sport has kind of grown with the XFL, well, not the XFL anymore, the UFL, and all the different leagues out there, would you gain interest? Do you kind of miss being on the field, or do you kind of find other ways to have that competitive mindset, but in a different way?
Yeah. So every year in about July, I start missing football a lot. It's when I'm like, around the time I'm supposed to start reporting for camp. It's the weirdest thing. It's just like a internal clock. And that usually lasts pretty strong. Like the first few weeks of football season, especially watching Kentucky, are tough. And then I just accept that it is what it is. Yeah. And then as far as finding other outlets, I've gotten into MMA training a little bit. I love Muay Thai, done a bit of grappling here and there. But it's nothing's going to replace football. So unless you're hearing the roar of 80,000 people, it's really hard to top football.
Yeah.
But for me, like I think it's important to continue to train at a high level, and I still train as though I'm trying to play in the NFL. And so that helps.
What do you currently do that kind of keeps your passion going and finding fun each and every day for work?
The company that I work for has been phenomenal for that. So when my football career ended, I landed at a sports technology company. They were really small at the time, not small, but small compared to now. And so it's in the field of sports science. And so I've spent the last almost 6 years with this company. And in a lot of ways still has kind of startup energy. And so there's just a lot of challenges, and it's a job that demands quite a bit. I demand of myself, I would probably put it better. quite a bit to succeed and do well. And I still always feel like I'm not doing that great. So just, you know, interesting challenges of trying to help grow a small company. And I think that obviously a lot of it isn't fun, but some of it is really fun. And so, yeah, I think it's a good situation overall.
I mean, no one says that Rise of the Challenge journey is going to be the easiest thing in the world. You have to go through all those obstacles. Is there anything from your journey with being an athlete that has helped you the most when it comes to this job? A skill, a characteristic, kind of a technique?
I would say, I think the threshold comment that I mentioned earlier probably is a big one. Just like, look, if the week requires an obscene amount of hours, then it's what it requires.
Mhm.
I don't. I'm pretty unemotional, and maybe that's just my personality. But I would like to think that maybe some of that I did pull from my time in football. Um, just fairly steady in terms of my uh, emotions in work when things are up, when things are down, when demands are high, and it's I have to stay up late and maybe get up early, and I'm getting behind on things despite working a lot of hours. It's easier for me to say just it is what it is. And I can't really recall a time that I've been at least externally frenzy. So yeah, I think football raised the bar a little bit there for me.
Something that when people follow you is you like to post content about really sharing your journey, your stories, the things that you do. And something that I found interesting was every Friday you're going to the ocean, just going into the water and doing that. What has that done for you from a mental standpoint, a physical standpoint, an emotional standpoint, being able to share that within a public forum?
Yeah, I've really grown to enjoy that. I think I started I started it, I think the second Friday of the year, and kind of just thought, maybe I'll just do this every Friday. Um, and for me, I think it's just a cool time to maybe reflect on some of the things that went wrong or right during the week. And it's also somewhat of an anchor where it's, you know, I when Friday gets there, it's a reminder that it's Friday morning, and like, geez, so I've even had a couple people message me and say, geez, I wanted to start training on your last video, and you're already posting the next one again. Like the week flew by and I haven't started on what I wanted to do yet. So I think that's kind of cool. And it functions that way for me as well. There's, it's the year really isn't that long when you think about it. We have 52 of those Fridays. And so for me, it's just more than anything, it's just a constant reminder, because I got to do the video and then I get home and I start editing it. And every time my caption is week 7, 2024, week 8, 2024. And I'm writing out these weeks going, holy cow, like Q1 is almost done.
Yeah.
And so these large projects that maybe are kind of easy to procrastinate on because they don't have deadlines, it's nice to have a reminder. Now it's week 9. Now it's week 10. Now it's, how many weeks do you need before you carve out 2 hours to turn off every notification on your phone, lock yourself in a closet, get in front of the computer, and eliminate every possible excuse, get it done. Like
Yeah.
create a roadmap, lay out the steps, and then get it done. And so, yeah, for me, it functions as a good reminder for that.
And I love how you taken that example, and even like a 60-second clip ain't going to explain everything, but you just sharing what that moment does for you. I think a lot of people will be able to utilize that in their daily lives, from something that they do every week and being able to say, am I getting this done? Like, you even think about the TV shows that we all watch. It's one episode a week. And you think when you get to that season finale, you're like, is it already the end of this time? And you kind of mentioned quarter 1 is about to be almost over in 4 weeks. Like, have you been able to get everything done so that it's rewarding when you look back at it.
Yeah, that's huge. It's non-deadline tasks really get to people, and they've gotten to me historically. And I think if we can architect our environment in a way that creates more pressure on us to tackle those tasks, like we're all worried about getting away from pressure, like it's a bad thing. And I think you can either create this, build this structure around you that pressures you to do the things you know you're supposed to do, or you can not do that. And the burden of anxiousness and unsettled decisions and a feeling of inadequacy and weakness will put pressure on you anyways. So you might as well choose to take the path of self-imposed pressure, because it generally leads to much more fulfillment and a better life.
With doing those Friday videos, has it spurred some kind of ideas of doing another day also, but a different activity to really kind of fulfill that whole week? Like everyone knows that Friday is that time you're going to be posting something, but getting people excited about another day also. Has that ever come about to you?
That's a good idea. It's funny because right now I'm not a major influencer or anything like that with, a billion followers. So it is always funny to see the small group of people that are interested in following and care about the videos. But it could be cool to do something Thursday mornings, or and there really isn't magic about Friday. I think maybe some people thought I'm doing it because it's the end of the week or whatever else. For me, my week just generally doesn't end right there on Friday. There's so much more left to do. And I know that's the case for a lot of people probably listening. But I picked Friday. I think I mentioned this in one of the videos because people are normally in pretty good moods on Fridays.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I'm uploading these videos, if you catch people at the right time and people feel good when they watch your stuff, I think there's maybe a greater likelihood that they'll pay closer attention and maybe, adopt one or two of the things that you say that make sense to them. And that's like the goal with all this. I know that's the goal with what you're doing with this podcast, is like being able to see somebody have a positive change, even if it's small, from something that you put out, is really cool. And that's kind of the thought behind it.
I think every time I see your video, I'm always jealous you're close to an ocean, and it'd have to take me like a few hours just to find a body of water that I could even do.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's a nice gratitude reminder. It's living by the water is just awesome.
We kind of been on that journey with how family has been an importance for you, and family now has been even more important. When you're doing daily tasks, doing daily things with your family, what are the big things you look for in making those moments memorable, or keeping the mindset of, I can't wait for that next moment, that next memory, or that next achievement?
Yeah, I just was talking about mine about this. And one of the things I said to him was, he's going through a massive company change and a bunch of stuff going on. But him and I both, we talk about our, business kind of stuff for several years now. And so I've heard the big stuff that's been happening with him for years. And every time there's like a lot of big things, I'm sharing big things, he's sharing big things. And I said something like, dude, you've been going through this stuff for years and you're still here. There have been so many times where it's like, this is a bad thing happening, but everything's okay. And you're still here. And it's the same for me. So just remembering that it's, the saying, when you worry, you suffer twice. Things are going to happen. Stressful things are going to happen at work. Things are not going to go your way. But you're probably still going to be at your job, or you're still going to be doing your thing, tomorrow and the next day,
Yep.
as long as you're still alive. And so I think in a similar way, maybe a year and a half ago, had a situation, my grandparents, or just my wife's grandparents, came over for dinner, and they were just sitting down, and we were having them over to our house and cooked a steak and this whole nice thing. and I checked my phone and saw something come through that was like a really, really gnarly work thing. And I was kind of preoccupied with it, and it was completely tuning me out of the dinner altogether. It was just like, this is not good. I need to fix this problem. And then I just remember thinking, I don't have to be negatively affected by this right now because there really isn't anything I can do. I'm not going to tell, hey, grandma and grandpa, I'll see you later. Thanks for driving 45 minutes down this way. You know, I'm not going to spend the next 90 minutes with you. I knew that, you know what, I can go solve this when they leave.
Hmm.
It'll be 9 o'clock when they leave. I'll solve this problem then. So what's the point in thinking about it between now and the time that I'm going to solve the problem? And that was a cool thing for me because really since that time, I've kind of taken that mindset with me, which is as best as I can, being 100% in when I'm at work and 100% out when I'm not, and I can't fix the problems. And so I think like I'm guilty of this historically of kind of being 50% on all the time. I'm constantly working and constantly, you know, checking notifications and stuff, but not really moving the needle on big work projects because I'm like, so preoccupied and never really having an on-off switch, which also means I'm 50% on in the times that I'm supposed to be, you know, with my wife and daughter. And so finding a way to hone in, it's like you know, tunnel vision on work and then horizon vision when it's my family. And just being 100 and 0 versus 50-50 has been the biggest game changer, I think, for me.
Being open about that, I'm guilty of when I close my laptop, I'm still thinking about work and I shouldn't be because it's not like anything else is going to change. It can wait until tomorrow. And my family hears it all the time where I'm complaining about what just happened the last 8 hours of that day. But I've had to tell myself, like, you're there for that time. Once I close that laptop, you've got to let it go and like leave it in the office because time is so wasted if you're thinking about things that can't be figured out or like you mentioned solved at that time. Like being with family is so important because you never know when that last day could be, and you don't want it to be remembered as I was worrying about a work problem not being there with that family member or the people around you.
That's 100%. And it's something that I didn't appreciate the parallels between human performance for sport and cognitive performance in work are enormous. And I fully respect the fact that, you know, when you're trying to get stronger and faster, if you were to train uh, at moderate volumes and intensities kind of all day, every single day without taking an off day, you just wouldn't get any faster or stronger. But then sometimes it's easy to forget that in the workplace, that pulsatile behavior is beneficial as well. Go in, work very hard, high intensity, very, very focused, and then be completely out, rest. I think you know, the processes of brain, you know, the rest of, you know, psychological rest is probably different. They're different. The physiology is different there, but the end product is very similar where I think we function a lot better when we're in and out instead of just kind of always on.
What's been the biggest thing about being a father for you? What has been special about that time with your daughter?
Oh man, it, it's been the best thing ever. I mean, I was excited to have Harper, but I don't think, you know, I just told my wife and I were just talking about this. Like, you know, when we brought her home from the hospital, I loved her already. You know, she's my daughter. But in looking back then compared to what it's like now, it's just night and day. It feels like, you know, if I loved her an inch now, it's, you know, it's a mile. It's just so different. Um, Getting to watch her learn and smile and laugh and all of that. And even, you know, I work from home, so having moments throughout the day, maybe it's a little bit distracting. But it's, you know, moments where Giselle, my wife, is walking past with her and just hands her to me for 5 minutes, and she sits right exactly where I'm sitting right now, and she sits on my desk, and I kind of like talk to her, and she laughs, and that's the coolest thing ever. And it also, I'm like weirdly an evangelist now for people having kids if they can, because I think I used to understand people's argument for not wanting to have them.
Mhm.
I Alex Hormozy's talked about. Yeah, I'm sure you know who Alex Hormozy is. Not wanting to have kids and why him and Layla don't want to. And when I first heard that, I thought, man, I don't really have a good argument against that. Like he's very logical with the way he presented it. But then I had Harper, and now I would love to talk to Alex now. Um, so yeah, man, it's awesome. It's the best thing ever. It probably wasn't even a clear answer to your question, but it's really cool.
No, I mean, when people are listening to that, they can hear the emotions that you get from it and how you were explaining just her being in your presence is how is so magical for you. And they kind of goes off of where you said when you heard Alex Hormozy say that, and then actually Harper being there, it's a change for you and what the impact, as much as parents probably don't like the screaming and are yelling the kid is doing, but there's something about that they probably look at it and like, okay, they're gonna grow up sometime. They got to get through that phase at that point.
Yeah, it's and just getting to watch your kid grow up is really cool. And I'm only 7.5 months in, so there's plenty of road ahead. Obviously, Lord willing. But yeah, it's really cool.
Still going on the family route. Recently, you had a big moment with your dad, who is a wrestler, and you got to kind of be involved in his world in a way. Looking at those times, and as he's kind of going down the end of his career, what did those moments mean for you where you're on TV with him, you're seeing him live, you see him on TV, but that bond that you guys have, what does that mean so much for you?
You probably, geez, we scheduled this podcast a couple months ago. Landing this episode now is pretty good timing on your part. This might be the most interesting time for me to answer that question, because I think for my whole life I've pretty much answered everything the same way, which is, look, I was born, he was Sting when I was born. I don't know anything different. He like I've always respected and admired what he does. I think it's super cool. But he keeps his work at work, and when he comes home, he wants to talk about football or whatever else we're doing. And that's kind of just always been my answer. Maybe pretty vague, pretty indescriptive, but I think now, like in his final moments, I'm maybe a little bit more reflective of his career and um, what he's gone through, and yeah, it's just the end. And so I think getting to experience that with him was really cool. It wasn't planned. Funny enough, I wasn't even so actually, so in November, the first time we kind of had a bit of a moment there in his match in LA. um I came into the ring at the end. That wasn't planned at all, and probably wouldn't have happened. I was supposed to be sitting in a different section, and a weird thing happened where I ended up sitting where it made sense to do that. But um, yeah, just being involved in any capacity and being able to kind of witness what he's like um, behind the walls in the arena is pretty cool, because it's just something that we kept so separate for most of our life. And I was perfectly fine with that. It wasn't that he wouldn't talk about it or that we couldn't talk about it. It was just, we were just so used to it. It's just what he
Yeah.
did. And he wanted to talk about, you know, what happened at football practice or whatever else, and tell jokes. And that's kind of what we've always done. But, now it's the end, and yeah, it's probably a little bit more reflective, and my thoughts on it aren't really all together yet. They probably will be over the next week.
What are the big goals you have for yourself looking towards the future? Anything from a personal standpoint, a professional standpoint, that's something that you're hoping to achieve or you're excited about the road ahead?
I'm so for me, I'm two things. One, I'm the company that I mentioned, Vald, that I've worked with for almost 6 years now. We launched a separate company under the Vald umbrella called Saga, and that's the company that I manage now. And so I have a lot of goals for growing Saga as big as we possibly can, and making an impact on the that fitness performance space through Saga. A lot of goals with Saga from a content production standpoint, just making the company function better, and over the next couple of years, a lot of really big goals there. And then I've thought about, at some point Vald's not going to be here. Um, but you never know. These things are never sure, but you know, I can't bank on Vald still being the Vald that it is now in, 10 years. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't, but if um for me to kind of prepare the foundation for something that I want to do whenever the Vald story ends. So that's where my content is coming into play. I'm producing my own content, and I don't really know what I want to do with it yet. I'm just trying to talk about the things I'm interested in, and training, and getting as strong and as fast and jump as high as I possibly can, and um, kind of document the process of doing that, and whatever comes of it comes of it. But those are my goals right now. Just continue getting really good at making content, and about things that I actually want to make content about, and the stuff that I'm doing, um, and grow Saga as big as I can.
The final question I'll ask you, for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
I would just say it's often much more simple than we think. If you know that you want to do something, uh, then you probably shouldn't spend much time deliberating about it. Just look at what the end goal is, and then create a plan. And it won't be a perfect plan, but you have to create some sort of roadmap. You need to know what the steps are, that at least that you're going to take tomorrow, the next day, and the next day. Um, Write them down, and be specific. I know tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. I'm going to have a 4-hour time block, and I'm going to accomplish this portion of that large whale project that I'm trying to work on. And it's as simple as knowing where you want to go and then laying out the steps to get there. Most people can potentially get that far. They just don't take the steps because they don't have the confidence. And I just think it doesn't matter whether or not you have the confidence. You just start taking the steps, you'll build the confidence along the way. Um, so I think the biggest message is it's usually more simple than you think. We're looking for, the hack, or this complex strategy to help us figure out how to make the whole thing work for us, when really it's usually just a very simple, boring series of events. It's just like getting in shape. If you backed almost anybody on the planet in the corner and said you need to get in as good a shape as possible in 90 days, most people, without any knowledge, they'd never opened a nutrition textbook in their life, would figure out the answer. They would go, and they might not do everything perfect, but they would get in really good shape in 90 days, because they would go, I'm pretty sure bodybuilders eat like chicken and broccoli, and maybe I'll have a little bit of rice, and they would do it. They'd find a way. They'd start exercising. They'd start lifting weights, and they would get enormously positive outcomes. And none of that is something that requires advanced knowledge on the topic. It's just logic, a little bit of intuition, and most importantly, just consistent action replicated day over day. And most people, I think, can change their entire life if they just do that.
Steven, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we are excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Tune in next time to hear my next guest talk about their rise to the challenge. Remember to follow, subscribe on all major audio platforms. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get full length episode in video format. What path do you take to accomplish your goals? You decide.